everyone. This is a panel session. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in pharmaceuticals. But first, we just heard from Yvonna and Michael, but we haven't heard yet from Oscar. So maybe Oscar, just give us a quick, brief introduction to yourself and what you do.
Sounds great. So good to meet you, everyone. My name is Oscar Viyuela. I'm an engagement manager with McKinsey out of the Boston office. I do most of my work in the intersection between healthcare, pharma, and advanced analytics. So I typically serve either pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies, that want to leverage kind of like advanced analytics to solve a bunch of different problems, whether in market access, R&D, and so on. And I also work with quantum computing companies who are either trying to find use cases in industry that are appealing to customers, either prioritize those efforts given the limited quantum capabilities of today or potential quantum computing capacity, and also as they are scaling and becoming bigger due to funding, how to think about their operating model, how to integrate different teams with different expertise, and so on and so forth. And then before that work at McKinsey, I spent most of my career in academia, did a PhD in physics and quantum computing, spent a few more years at MIT and Harvard in different groups, doing research and teaching about quantum computing. So this is at the, very close to my heart, where I have most of my friends in this field. So that's why I kind of despite doing a lot of my work in pharma, I still feel very close to quantum.
Okay, very good. So, I'm always interested in terms of how companies start their efforts, and I like to classify it either as a tops-down effort where a CEO or CTO says, hey, this is an interesting area, it might help us, and they go out and they form a group, maybe they hire some people, or sometimes it's more bottoms up. Sometimes engineers are working in a different area, maybe it's non-quantum, and they go to their management and they say, hey, we think quantum can help here. Maybe you can give us a little budget. We could set up a small group to do that. So I'm going to ask first Michael and then Yvonna, how did yours start at your company? Tops down or bottoms up?
So I would say it was a mixture. Our CTO, Clemens Ucik, got interested in the topic also because, pharmaceutical industry is mentioned as one of the biggest profiteers of quantum computing. It's often mentioned like this. And for us, we are also a very research-based pharmaceutical company. We do a lot of research every day, and quantum computing was just the logical consequence of this process. And so it was more like a bottom-up process, I would say, and we decided then to set up a dedicated quantum computing team with 5 people, FTE, working full-time on quantum computing, doing applied research on quantum computing, and find applications inside the company.
Okay, and you were with your company before they set that up?
No, I was the process of this process.
Okay. So they hired you to join that team?
Yes.
Okay. And how about you, Yvonna?
Similar to what Michael described, it was also a combination of top-down and bottom-up. We have some senior sponsors who are visionary leaders at the company who believe in this technology or the potential of this technology. But we also have just a very, let's say, curious minds on the quantum computing team. So as opposed to BI, we don't have, let's say, a dedicated resource on this, or the people on the team are not hired to do quantum computing, but we do work with our, let's say, our own area expertise, and we're all very, let's say, interested in the technology and to see how that can be applied in our area expertise. For example, I work mainly with machine learning. And I think that there's a little bit difference there as well, but also, being scientific or situated in the R&D department, doing science, let's say pushing the boundary of what's possible, that's also part of our way of working.
Okay, very good. Now, Oscar, you have a different perspective since you work with many different companies. Do you see a trend with regards to how the programs started at companies?
To me, just to answer the question, in my experience, when we work with with executives in pharma companies. I mean, R&D or like drug discovery, which is like potentially one of the biggest applications of quantum computing in pharma, is like top of mind for leaders, because basically if you want to develop a drug from the moment you want to figure out a target that plays a relevant role for a disease till you have a drug in the market, that's a process that on average can take like 12 years, maybe a few billion dollars just per asset. So if you're able to do that process faster, cheaper, or potentially produce new drugs that you wouldn't have produced otherwise, that's going to be super important and top of mind for everyone. In my experience, whether that comes from AI or different ways of advanced analytics or quantum, maybe that matters a bit less, right? So if quantum could be like the next step, or like one of the things that you explore within an analytics team in a pharmaceutical company. But I think it's more looking at the relevance of the problem and the fact that if you can potentially add on something, even small, that can have a strong impact either on the top line or the bottom line of a pharmaceutical company.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of very important parameters. $1 to $2 billion to develop a drug in maybe 12 years. And the question I'll throw it to any one of you, do any of your companies have some goal like within 10 years from now we want to reduce that by a factor of 10? Do you have any specific goals that you're told, or is your management just saying, well, just research and tell me what you can do?
I mean, it's very, very hard to estimate things like that. I mean, it's a very long process. It includes many different methods you have to use. And quantum computing, as I said earlier, is in its very first steps. So it's hard to say what quantum computing will change in the future. We are now thinking about doing this quantum chemistry calculations faster than before, faster than with classical computers. But nobody can really say what the benefit of quantum computing in the pharmaceutical industry at the end will really be. This will also, I think we will learn a lot when the quantum computers will be around, when we can test heuristics, when we see where it works and where it doesn't work. But to estimate now how much money and how much time one could save is very hard.
Okay, no, those set goals. So one buzzword that I hear a lot is quantum inspired, where companies are now looking at other means of accelerating drug discovery. One company I just was reporting on was setting up like 200 systems full of GPUs and artificial intelligence to do that, and to some extent it's competing against a possible quantum solution. Are number one, are your companies involved in anything like that, where they're using GPUs or artificial intelligence, and are you involved in any of that? And I'll ask Yvonna.
Yeah, so I would say that's become, let's say, the standard. For example, molecular property prediction, using our, let's say, the latest machine learning algorithms that run on our high-performance computing with, I don't know, hundreds of GPUs. So that's already, let's say, the standard of business, so to speak.
Maybe just to add one small thing to that, I think probably that's also a nice entryway for many quantum computing companies developing software, because there's more adoption across pharmaceutical companies of advanced analytic solutions, whether it's AI or other methods. So if you, as a company, if you're able to provide some advanced analytic solutions that maybe are like quantum inspired, some DMRD type of things or so on, and then on top of that, you promise that, hey, when quantum computing hardware is there, we will be able to unlock even further value. I think that's a very compelling story for a pharmaceutical company. Sorry for
Okay. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I want to say what's interesting in this area is that using, let's say, the machine learning technique, we are offering to scientists this interactive real-time response, right? So when they make a change in their molecular structure, they're expecting results within, let's say, a second or so, how that property changes. So this is what's already currently possible with high performance computing. So yeah, that's definitely a high bar for quantum computing to kind of beat at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, and both of you said that the current generation of quantum computers are just not powerful enough to do commercially useful work. It's good for doing what I would call toy models. Do you have any specific targets? Let's say there was a hardware company sitting here in the audience, and they wanted to build a quantum computer specifically for these applications. Would you have any specific targets with regard to the number of qubits or qubit fidelity rates that you would like to see that you could immediately start using it for a real live commercially useful drug discovery?
So this is something I showed already in my talk before, that for example, to simulate a P450 molecule, we would require something like 4 million qubits and a few days of runtime. I know that's quite a lot. And also to stress this here, this would be just one hero calculation, a calculation you couldn't do classically. This doesn't mean that you would use it in production. We would still be far away from using something like this in production. It would be this first step towards showing that you would be able to run something which you cannot run classically. But to honestly run something which really would help in production, speeding up the drug discovery process, therefore we still have first to find the right algorithms. And then we could also think about how costly would that be.
Okay. And you see any targets there, Oscar?
What I wanted to add to that is, because I think one of the biggest takeaways from both of your talks, which I think were great, is that even though we always think that hardware is kind of like the bottleneck, right? Just improving hardware. I think this is a great example of like how much work there needs to be done on the software side, either to improve like quantum error correction methods, so then the overhead is lower, but also like how can you get like faster run times, how can you optimize like your set of gates, and I would say that's one. And then the second thing is even thinking more outside the box. I think many of the workflows that you guys have described is the standard workflow that you have for computer aid solutions. But if you were to have a quantum computer, are there other completely different workflows that you could think of that would be better suited for a quantum machine? I think that's an open question, and it requires quite some research to be done still.
Definitely. The just taking the classical approach and put a quantum piece in it probably will not work. This is something we figured out in the molecular dynamics simulation, where we just wanted to have more accurate forces from the quantum computer to make better MD. But this is way too expensive. So we really have to rethink this. We have to find better approaches and make it all more quantum, I would say, in the end. Try to get everything on the box and only ask the quantum computer when it's absolutely necessary.
Okay. So, in the quantum hardware space, I see the dichotomy versus the various providers. There are some companies that basically say, look, you're never going to do anything valuable until you have a fault-tolerant quantum computer, and this stuff just won't work. And of course, you have other companies that say, yeah, NISQ will work. We think maybe with hybrid quantum computing, classical NISQ working together, we can do something that's useful that you could not do with classical alone. So let me ask Yvonna, do you see any value in NISQ, or do you really think that for your types of things you're doing, you're really going to need fault-tolerant quantum computing?
That's a tough question. I think we are still on the pursuit of finding the right NISQ application, and I think to maybe a certain degree echo what Michael and Oscar has said is that maybe just putting a classical problem, throwing it directly on the quantum computing is not the way to go. Maybe we need to, in this NISQ area, look for algorithms where it cannot be done at all with classical, and we have to, the solution maybe have to be a little more creative. So I would say that's still maybe the golden nugget that we're looking for at the moment, and we can't say we found it yet, but I think it's still worth trying at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, Michael, Oscar, do you have any votes for NISC?
I would say I get less optimistic from year to year about NISC.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still worth trying. Maybe somebody finds a good idea also to utilize NISC devices. But yeah, I would say our focus is more on the FTQC side, because the results we saw over the last couple of years are not very promising on the NISC side, I would say.
Okay.
I would say worth a try. Maybe it can depend on the problem, right? So for example, like there's hardware architectures that might be better suited for certain problems, like optimization problems. If you think about, for example, like neutral atoms trapped with optical tweezers, I think that's a natural problem for a certain kind of optimization problem. So you could see, hey, can we try something NISC here and see what we get? The second thing is maybe it's not just either NISC or meaning like no error correction or no error mitigation or fault tolerant. Maybe like something with some error mitigation in between or like partial error correction could work. The thing is that it's more like an open question. There's no theoretical proofs that that's going to work. So then it's more you try, and if you find promising results in a specific area, then maybe you keep trying, and if not, you move to something else.
Okay. So, I'm not an expert in pharmaceuticals or drug discovery, else I'd be working for one of their companies. But within drug discovery, are there any specific groups of ligands or proteins that you think are more amenable to researching with quantum computing than others? Any ones that you guys are focusing on? Start again, Yvonna again.
So I'm not sure if I understood you.
So are there any specific ligands or proteins that you're focusing on that you think might be easier to simulate with a quantum computer?
I think here's where we, through let's say the two different projects we conducted, with the current, let's say, size limitation and it's not so compatible at the moment with usually the molecules that we look into. And proteins are also very complicated molecules. So I think we saw, for example, with the H3 loop, right? It's a very specific part of the antibody with, I think that was 10 amino acids, and we already saw with the quantum computer that's taking, orders of magnitude, or it would take orders of magnitude longer compared to the classical solution. So I think I have to say the short answer from our investigation so far is we haven't found that yet. Unfortunately.
Okay.
And can I try to double down on your question?
Sure.
Always my thinking was that maybe molecules where charge transfer, like polarization effects, proteins where that plays a bigger role, or like this like intrinsically disordered proteins, like things that might be harder classically could be good targets for a quantum computing. I don't know, based on your experience, because you know probably like way more than me on this, is like, are there specific things that are particularly hard for a classical computer or classical methods that you're like, okay, if a quantum computer could solve this, that would be really meaningful?
Okay, how do I phrase this? I think there are specific problems. For example, I think we were looking into a specific admit property that we know from let's say our chemists, that a specific quantum effect is responsible for predicting the property. So we let's say wanted to leverage that to gain some advantage, but I think again, like I think similar to the binding affinity is right now with just the simplifications that we have to make with these calculations. It wasn't giving us realistic results. I think it's still the basic underlying mechanism is still too complex to be simulated directly on the hardware today. But I think like we said for the binding affinity use case, we know that this is a result giving this giving the simplification, giving the assumptions that we throw into the machine. We do look forward to the potential of having these bigger machines, and then we're maybe able to simulate a bigger part of that molecule with maybe less of the constraint that we put onto it. And then I think hopefully by then we would be able to get better level accuracy. It's just at the moment, we haven't been able to find that pocket where, with the constraint that we're playing with, that we're able to see that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I specifically find the pharmaceutical industry as being interesting because there's actually multiple use cases. We've talked so far about drug discovery, but, there's a lot of data involved with clinical trials, manufacturing, distribution, all sorts of optimization opportunities, because of course these are billion-dollar businesses. And I'll throw this open to anyone. Have any of you looked at some of these other applications of quantum computing in your research?
So before joining BI, I worked for Volkswagen, the car company, and
Okay.
we looked heavily into optimization problems too, to speed up processes in factories, for example. The problem always there is that with quantum computing, you cannot expect exponential speed up in solving these problems. What you could expect is something like a quadratic speed up, but then you have the problem that you have to go to extremely big problem sizes. If you just tackle the problems which are small, you will not see the speed up because the constant factors are too huge, and then you find yourself in an area which would require huge quantum computers again. So that's still an open question whether you could find some benefit in solving optimization problems. I'm rather skeptical about that. With machine learning or in general problems where you have to put a lot of data on the quantum computer, that's also an issue because it's extremely hard to put classical data onto the quantum computer. Nobody actually knows how to do this efficiently. So there you have the problem that you might be able to find an efficient quantum machine learning algorithm, but if you cannot get the data onto the quantum device, you cannot really use it. And a famous example, for example, is also Grover's algorithm. If you want to search a database, you have to get the data on the quantum computer. But by putting the data on the quantum computer, you saw already the data, and you know which is the best solution to the problem. Yeah. So this is an issue in all of these problems, that you have to somehow be able to put this data efficiently on a quantum computer, and nobody knows how to do that. And because of that, I'm rather skeptical about whether we could find also advantages in solving these optimization problems or classical machine learning problems.
Sometimes when I've had conversations with clients on try to prioritize use cases, typically I would say there's a rule of thumb that you could do of what could potentially have more impact in the short term. First, problems that involve not a big data set. Second, problems that are hard for a classical computer today. And ideally that they're not good methods that kind of get you almost there currently. And I think that's why initially people were more interested in chemistry or material science or pharmaceuticals, because it's okay, it's a small data problem. Ideally, you're trying to simulate a molecule. It's something that computers are bad if you want to have, especially quantum chemistry simulations, and that's why it's more appealing initially. Problems that involve a huge data set for which you already, even just some Monte Carlo methods or other things are work pretty well. I think they become more challenging, and then maybe the way you try to find an interesting problem is try to find something very specific within the landscape of optimization problems that is particularly hard for classical computers. But I think it becomes a more narrow search, not quantum computers are going to solve all optimization problems in the midterm even.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me take a break from myself asking questions and see if there's any questions from the audience. But the lights are shining in our eyes, so please raise your hand if you have any questions. No, any questions at this point? Okay. Well, I'll let you think about it for a bit, and I'll come back to you. I still have some more questions on my list here. So it's tough to do a lot of this on your own. If you saw my talk this morning, I mentioned partnerships are important. I think Yvonna, I saw that you were working with QCware, and you were, I think, working on machines from IBM and Continuum. Was it
Continuum.
Continuum? Yeah. Were there any other partnerships you were working on, or how important were those partnerships of those three companies?
Yeah, so I think for each of the use cases, we partner with different companies, and I think in general, we try to work with, let's say, the expert in that field, right? For example, QC, where Jordanus is very strong in this supervised machine learning space, and with Continuum, we were also very lucky that we were able to tap into two types of different hardware, and then to do this benchmarking exercise. So I think that's let's say one of the let's say key takeaway that we took from those efforts is finding the right collaboration partner, especially in contrast to BI, we don't have our in-house quantum computing experts. We give our, let's say, domain knowledge, right? We try to guide the research questions to make sure that they're pertinent for the industry, and we also try to point them in the right direction in terms of designing the solution. But yeah, in the end, it takes those experts from our partners to come up with the right solutions. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And Michael, I saw on your slide it says Google was mentioned on your slide. So do you work with any? Maybe I don't know if you could say how you worked with Google and whether or not you work with anybody else.
So we're working with Google, but also with QCware on, for example, the subwork I showed. That was a collaboration with QCware and the chemistry team around Roche and also Matthias Leibersberger. Also with Google, we work closely, and it's like a research collaboration, I would say. It's very important to us to have these collaborations, not only with other companies, but also with academia, because at the end of the day, quantum computing is a huge topic, and it's a very hard topic too. And we are just a few people inside the quantum computing lab. So to really make a difference and to find a solution to our problems, we have all to work together, otherwise this will never work. And so this kind of collaborations are extremely important to us, also to tell like the academic world and other companies what are actually the problems inside the pharmaceutical industry, which we would like to solve. And this is a very important angle for us, to also bring this to the academic world, to explain what are the real problems we have to solve, despite having like this small toy systems where you at the end of the day might be able to run something on your quantum computer which you couldn't do on a classical computer, but this at the end of the day would not bring us a real quantum advantage in the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, great. Now, Oscar, your business basically is partnerships, so you're partnering with your clients. Maybe you could sort of give us a general idea of the types of partnerships that you've been involved in, how you can help pharmaceutical companies who are looking at quantum?
So the way we've done it so far is either looking at potential use cases that can be more like the most impactful for these pharma companies, also how to prioritize maybe those efforts. Also when they want to build teams initially, of like, hey, what would it take for me to build a team that explores this area. Then the other thing we've done too is we've partnered sometimes with a quantum computing company as well. And then given that we have already strong relationships with many clients across industries, if they've shown interest on quantum computing, or they just want to see like what are the next steps beyond the analytics work that you guys do with us, what kind of like trying to be a mediator as well between, or bridging the gap between sometimes quantum software providers or quantum computing companies and clients in the pharma space, medical device, and other industries as well. So I think that's kind of like the two roles, trying to like scope what the future would look like, how this like quantum computing would impact specific firm, and also trying to serve as like kind kind of like bringing the two worlds together of industry and quantum computing solutions.
Okay, very good. So another question I'd like to ask all three of you. Let's assume there's a pharmaceutical company or someone in the audience who has not yet set up their program, but they're planning to do so beginning next year. Are there any words of advice you'd give that person, either things that they absolutely should be sure that they do to make sure that they have a successful programs, or possibly mistakes that you might have made where they should avoid and not do those mistakes? Any words of advice for some hypothetical person in the audience? And I'll start with Yvonna there.
Yeah, I think from our let's say journey so far, starting in 2018, is in order to design, let's say, a successful program, I think it's important to gauge, let's say, what type of activity that, or let's say, what the objective, right, is. Is it to push for fundamental research, or is it to maybe to bring the workforce up to date, to kind of just educate yourself? So I think the first advice is to kind of clarify what exactly you want to achieve, and then design the program, and also maybe also gauge how much, let's say, readiness there is from your own organization, right? Is there already existing knowledge in the quantum computing space, or are people, let's say, willing to ramp themselves up? So I think these are the type of consideration, right? So that would influence your decision, who's the right partners, and if you need to bring in, let's say, external partners, or potentially open up a new team. So I think these are the type of questions that when we talk to other parts of Roche who are interested in this question, we also try to help them navigate by clarifying these two, let's say, key aspects. Yeah.
Okay, great. Michael, any words of advice?
Yeah, definitely what is really important is to bring the quantum computing people in your company together with the domain experts in the pharmaceutical domain. For example, we are working very closely with people from computational chemistry. They explain us what are the bottlenecks they see right now in the classical approaches, and also help us to identify the use cases. And this is very important because you cannot expect that the quantum computing people have knowledge in quantum computing, chemistry, and the pharmaceutical industry. You have to bring these people together to really find the right use cases. A second thing, piece of advice is that you have to be aware of that this will be a long journey. It will not be an endeavor for just a year. You will have to have this, you have to have in mind that this will take still a while until we see a quantum advantage in the pharmaceutical industry. And we'll have to support doing this applied research for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, great. So again, Oscar, you work with a variety of different companies, so I'm sure you've probably seen some people who've made some mistakes. Any words of advice to, again, someone new who's trying to get into this area?
I think they've summarized it pretty well. It's not a short journey. It's very like a long journey. Having the goals pretty clear of what you want to do, and then having the right people in your team, but also the right connections, as Mikhail was mentioned. I think I've seen some work that has been done on like trying to do proof of concept of probably like areas where there's no real bottleneck, or it's not something that's like, okay, yeah, you can do this, that's great. But like have in mind what are the specific use cases that are going to matter the most, and then work towards those. And if there's intermediate steps that you need to take to get there, that's great, but then have like some planning, potentially like start small and keep growing. But I think they've summarized it pretty well.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So let me give one last chance to people in the audience. If you have any questions, we only have a few minutes left. Anything? Yeah, there's somebody in the back there. Why don't you just yell out your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering how, like, moving forward, how you would do how would you find literature to compare your quantum results to things that already happen in the lab? Do you do this like in-house? Do you like have specific like experiments that you run that you then compare to, or are you looking to like better like have some sort of classical benchmarking you run like multiple?
I see. So how do you compare results from your quantum simulation to what you see in the lab? Any responses there?
Yeah, so this is an extremely good question, because right now and with quantum computing we try to solve the model we put. And in the experiment you have maybe a different Hamiltonian. In reality, it will not be the Hamiltonian you put on a quantum computer. So the question is not only is the quantum computer able to solve the model you want to solve, but how close is the model to reality? And this is the first question, which is really, really hard to answer. How close is the model to the reality you see in an experiment? And then the second question is, how well can you solve the model you put on the quantum computer? And there what you can do is always to also compare to very costly classical computations. See, for example, if you now would have a larger quantum computer where you could get some results out, you could check how close is it to, for example, to some calculations you do with DMRG. And because we have these classical methods, but they're just very, very expensive, and for the time being where the quantum computer is still small, you can always benchmark this and see that the quantum results will actually be very much worse than what you would get from the classical computation. But for the future, at some point, you will also have to build this trust in your quantum computation and believe that it will be correct what a quantum computer spits out, because then there is no way that you can compare anymore to classical methods.
Yeah. So to add a slight different angle to that is this is, let's say, one of the effort that we've been putting into from our team is to participate in different industry consortia. So there are organizations popping up in Europe and also elsewhere to establish these, let's say, public benchmark. So we are in there. We're also pushing for, let's say, the specific data sets that we see to be particularly of interest and pertinent from the pharma perspective. So actually, all the use cases that we've introduced in this deck, you have these as open source data set. And of course, we have our own internal validation data set as well. But this is what we're pushing for. It's kind of some type of industry standard. So people who are interested in this can use that as a starting point.
Okay, great. And I think someone in the second row. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yes, I have a follow-on question on this discussion you're having about NISC and possible use cases, beating the bushes, looking for maybe possibly some use case that could be useful for NISC, and then specifically on the noise part of that. Do you have a sense from your experimentation, do you have a sense for whether there is some improvement in noise reduction, some specific improvement in noise reduction or 2-qubit gate fidelity that would open up more use case possibilities for you in your research?
I would say this is very hard to answer, because it's not only the fidelities we need, it's not only the noise we need, but NISC has so many other caveats. For example, if you look at VQE, if you want to optimize it, you have to optimize it classically. You have to call it many times to get a statistical estimate of the result you see. And optimization is extremely hard. It's a classical optimization problem you have to do on top to the VQE run. Then you also have the problem of getting out the results. So you have to measure many times to get the estimate, so the constant energy of your system. These are all problems despite just the noise. So even if we would have no noise and perfect fidelities on the quantum computer, it still would be very hard to run this VQE ansatz type of algorithms. But yeah, definitely if you could improve fidelities of your 2-qubit gates, if you could reduce the measurement errors, this would be a step in the right direction, but it's hard to say whether this could give you then a possible advantage in an application.
Yeah, in addition to what Michael just mentioned, I think connectivity, for example, is also a big factor, right? So for the machine learning algorithm, we designed different circuits for different types of connectivity, and we see there's a trade-off. If you are able to have a machine with a higher level connectivity, then the required circuit depth would also be lower, right? But right now, I think on a lot of the machine that we're currently working with, we don't have that level of connectivity. So for our hardware experiment, we weren't able to run, let's say, the most the shortest circuits, we had to resort into a longer circuit, and then we also run into the problem, as you mentioned, with noise, with the coherence time and so on. So.